Thank you, Anita. Well, this morning we have Noah Mooney back. As you can see out there, he's a pastor in Maplewood. And we're delighted to have you. We're amazed that you keep coming back.
Well, hey, it is a privilege to be here again. I really do enjoy all of you. Your faith is a great encouragement to me. And I mean that sincerely. I saw up front, just as I was walking up, a duct-taped Bible right up here. And duct-tape Bibles are my favorite because an old saying I had heard is a Bible that's falling apart typically belongs to somebody who isn't. And I just love, I love your faithfulness and just being here. It really is a great encouragement to me, and I hope that I can return the favor this morning. I am at the Maplewood campus. I'm the pastor of campus operations there, but I've been at Eagle Brook for a little over 4 years now, so it has been a really big privilege. Last time I was here, I shared a little bit that you may not know, but that I am a Army chaplain, or a chaplain in the Army National Guard. So something that I do part-time, and normally it is part-time, but this last year, I had an opportunity to do something that I hadn't before. The Army had called me up and said, hey, we want you to go on a deployment. You can imagine me letting the wife know I got the phone call. Now, the deployment was something short. It was one where they needed me to fill in for a chaplain who couldn't endure the whole duration of the deployment. But this deployment was unusual because it was stateside, and it was none other than on the southwest border. I'm talking about California, Arizona, that specific area. And if you've watched the news, you've likely seen what it is that I was doing. I'm helping with Border Patrol, and I'm helping with the wall. Now, I'm the chaplain, but I'm going and I'm helping soldiers who are there, and they've been there for at least 9 months at this point. And they're helping process immigrants who are coming in, legal, illegal, so all the drama. If you want to get political, I've seen all of it. It was interesting to get behind the scenes. But what was really interesting for this time is normally when I show up, soldiers in the Army, they do enjoy a chaplain. Regardless of the religious background, they see the chaplain and they know, hey, this guy is here for one purpose, and that's to care for me. Regardless of my background, regardless of who I am, his one job is to care for me. And it's a great privilege because a lot of them invite you in. Even if they're not a Christian, even if they are an atheist, they invite you in and they welcome you to just journey alongside them. But what was interesting about this time is when I got there, I did receive a warm welcome. But there was a couple of people, and a couple of people who I worked close with man, they were just not happy that I was there. I got comments of, why are we spending taxpayers' dollars on you being here? You shouldn't be here. I don't think we need a chaplain. Wow. I had a couple that were like, well, you know, everything you believe is just made up anyways. I stopped believing in the tooth fairy and unicorns a long time ago. Whew, okay. And at first it was just kind of subtle jabs, but suddenly you would be in groups of people and you continue to get these like, we don't need religion here. Who needs a chaplain? Like, wow. And these jabs kept coming, and they kept coming sideways, and it hurt. It stung a little more. Normally I'm kind of resilient, and it stung this time. And maybe it was because these are people that I was entrusting myself to. But what was interesting is normally, I love apologetics. Apologetics, just simply giving a reason for why we believe what we believe. There's a lot of great evidence out there, scientific, logical, philosophical. There's a lot of amazing evidence out there that we can stand very strong in our faith. And as I began dialoguing with them, it was like they just had closed ears. They didn't have eyes to see or ears to hear, as Jesus would say. It just brushed right past them. And nothing that I said really seemed to hit home. They weren't really interested in connecting or even reasoning with me. And I was puzzled because I was like, man, I feel like I'm failing. I feel like there's nothing I can say that to get through to them to help them see where I'm coming from. But there was a topic that came up that stopped them dead in their tracks. And it really helped me understand a difference. It caused them to pause and go, just maybe he has something that I don't. And it came up around the conversation of marriage. Now, I want you to imagine we're riding in a big 15-passenger van, and so there's a bunch of us in there, and I'm sitting towards the back, and we're all having conversation, and the topic of marriage comes up. And one of the gentlemen goes, well, I don't really believe in marriage. Whoa, yeah, my wife and I, we got married, but we didn't really need to get married. And another one, she looks at me and she goes, yeah, me and my boyfriend, we've been living together for 6 years. Why would we ever get married? That's old-fashioned, it's archaic, it's an old way of doing things. Why would we agree to do this contract when I already have everything that I want out of the relationship? And besides, shouldn't my boyfriend know that I want to be with him instead of me just being obligated to be with him? Now, if you're tracking, a lot of people are beginning this trend. Some will say, hey, divorce rates are going down, and they are a little, but really what's going down is marriage rates. Fewer and fewer people are getting married. And so we begin dialoguing, and I'm like, well, I see what you're saying in that you want your boyfriend to know that you're with them and that you're not just there because you're married and you're on a contract and you have to be with them. But let me ask you this. What's going to happen when you decide you don't want to be with them? Well, I'll just leave and, I'll go on to another phase of life and they'll go on to another phase of life. And I'm like, well, what if they don't want to move on to another phase of life? What if they want to be with you? Well, I guess they're just going to have to grow up. Wow. Wow. When I began to think about it and I asked them further questions, I was like, well, think about this. When I got married, I went up to the altar and I didn't bring a list of demands. I didn't say, hey, now that you're about to be married to me, if you want to, you have to complete this, and you have to do that, and you have to serve me this way. No, I didn't bring a list of demands. What I brought was vows. Hey, I am willing to do this for you. I love you, and I would serve you for better or for worse, in sickness or health, through thick or thin, no matter what, I'm going to be there for you. Why? Because I love you. And I had to ask this woman that question. Do you think you love him? And that's where the conversation hit a roadblock. Suddenly, they realized the biggest thing that you can have in life was the very thing that they're missing. Love. Why? Because we get married not because it's in our best interest, not because we're trying to lock someone into a contract. We love somebody and we want them to know that we're going to be there for them no matter what happens, and that we are willing to go through thick or thin to be there for them. That's why I'm getting married to you, because I love you. It's not about me, it's about you. It's amazing, because we get married out of love, but ultimately it reflects not our love, but Christ's love for us. It's not reflecting just our commitment, it's reflecting Christ's commitment to us. Right? Jesus says, hey, I am with you no matter what. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am with you through thick or thin. It's beautiful. That's why we as Christians get married. It's because this marriage is a great symbol of Christ's commitment to us. And it was amazing because suddenly, these conversations I was having where they weren't getting anywhere, they began to go somewhere. Because they realized that they were missing something, and it was the fundamental piece of love. Now, it wasn't just any kind of love. It wasn't a self-interest love. It was a love that I would describe as tough love. Not tough love in the way I discipline somebody I love, but tough love in that no matter how tough the circumstances got, I was committed to loving you. It was wildly different than what they had without Jesus, because there was a commitment piece to it. And I began to see that tough love was the difference maker in my conversations with them. I wanted to bring a passage to light today that really talks about this concept of tough love. Now, I have to warn you, though, the passage itself is tough. So let's get into it. This is 1 Peter chapter 2, 18 through 20. It says this: you who are slaves must submit to to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. For God is pleased when, conscious of his will, you patiently endure unjust treatment. Of course, you get no credit for being patient if you are beaten for doing wrong. But if you suffer for doing good and endure it patiently, God is pleased with you. Now, I picked this passage because it's so hard. It's so tough. Right? Now, don't get distracted because you read it and every American's eyes go right to one word: slaves. Right? And you dial in on it, and we could spend time talking about the differences between slaves and what would likely be northern Turkey, modern-day Turkey. That was where Peter was writing to the churches then in the 60s. And so we could talk about what it was like in the 60s AD, what slavery looked like then versus what we think of as American slavery. And we could say, hey, it wasn't quite like what American slavery was. That's not what Peter's getting at. We could talk about all that, but you'd miss the point. What's beautiful is Peter here is digging in and he's saying, hey, look it. Even if they're kind or even if they're cruel, I expect you to treat them one way, which is with respect. It's tough because he's beginning to change the focus. He said, hey, it's not about your relationship with your masters and how they're treating you, whether it's fairly or whether it's with evil intent. It doesn't matter about how they're treating you. What matters is how you are treating them. The focus isn't on you, it's on them. That's the toughest piece about this love. This tough love, what's the hardest part about it isn't just the circumstances, is that it requires you to change your focus from me, which is who I live with every single day. When I wake up, I'm always thinking about me. But it's asking you to change the focus from you until them. That is what makes this so tough. This passage in 1 Peter, it actually is much bigger, but it's talking about a variety of relationships. In this one, we're dialed into talking about slaves, but it actually talks about the government. And it says, hey, as Christians, you are called to honor the emperor. Well, that's really tough because at this time, in the 60s AD, who was emperor of Rome? Nero. And what was Nero doing? He burned Rome, right? It's reported that roughly 70% of Rome burnt to the ground. People were furious, and at the end, what did he do? Oh, well, the Christians are the one that started the fire. Right? Persecution of Christians by the government and by the people at the time was intense. And yet, Peter says what? Honor the emperor. He's shifting the focus. It's not about you, it's about them. In another controversial passage just right after this, Peter says, husbands, honor your wives, even if they're unbelievers, and by your good deeds you might win them over. And what is he talking about in that relationship with wives winning over your husbands? He's not saying, hey, win them over so that way they might love you and that your marriage might be repaired. He's saying, by your love towards them, you might win them over to Christ. You're representing something much, much bigger than yourself here. This tough love that we're talking about, that's the point, is that it's tough. The hardest part about this is it shifts all these controversial relationships, us to the government and who's in control, us to our masters, whether we're slaves or whether they're our employers, us to our spouses, whether they're believers or not, all these controversial topics. That's why Peter selects them. He says, these are the tough relationships in your life, and that's why I'm talking about them. And what I need you to do is have tough love, where it moves from a focus of you to a focus of them. It's so tough. My wife and I, a couple years ago, we went on a trip to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, which I absolutely love. If you've never been there, we went kayaking, we saw waterfalls, I saw huge fish. We went out to an island in Mackinac, where it was an island where there's no automotive, right? Like you're just biking around when there's lots of horses. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and I loved it. But it was interesting because we have a good neighbor who, when you're gone for roughly 10 days, you're going to get mail, and you never know who's going to come to the house. And our neighbor agreed, hey, I will gather your mail for you and I'll keep it. and I'll have it all ready for you when you get back. So sure enough, my wife and I, we get back, and the first thing that we do, we make some cookies, and we bring them over to the house. Now, we haven't eaten lunch yet, but we're like, hey, let's just get cookies. We can get our mail, but we need to say thank you to the neighbor for what he did for us. Well, we get there, and him and his wife, they welcome us, and they're like, whoa, come in. And we're like, okay, we thought it was just going to be a quick exchange. We get our mail, here's your cookies, thank you. No, come sit down in our living room. And my wife's looking at me like, how long are we going to be here? And as we sit down, they begin, hey, it's great to see you. And I make the question of, hey, how are you guys doing? It was great. We've been doing good. We got your mail right here, but yeah, I've been reading this book. And the neighbor begins to talk about this book he's reading. And, I'm thinking like a minute goes by, 3 minutes goes by, 10 minutes goes by, and he just keeps talking about this book. Now, I'm imagining it's going to be dialogue. They know what? We just went on this 10-day trip, and it was awesome. We have so much that we could share with you. But do you know what never came? Hey, how was your trip? What did you do? We all have those people in our life, right? You give them an inch, they take a mile, and they'll talk and talk and talk unless you stop them. But here I am in this conversation where my wife's like, we gotta get out of here, save us. And I'm pausing, and I dare to ask another question. Hey, Jeff, how's your health doing? And he begins to open up. Well, the doctor doesn't have great news. I still have cancer. It hasn't gone away. I'm becoming more and more immobile. It's tough to breathe when I get out and about, and it's hard. Jeff, as you can imagine, is in his late 70s now. And it was amazing because in that moment what had happened, we had shifted the focus from me, us, to them. And this amazing thing happened of tough love. And suddenly Jeff felt seen. But there's an issue that we can have here, and that's that we can get so caught up in this passage of going, hey, as Christians, we're called to have this tough love. And it's all about this call to good works that Peter has of us, right? We're called to good works. And maybe there's someone in my life that I need to express tough love towards, where I'm in a tough situation with them, and I need to love them regardless of how they're treating me. We all have those relationships, and you might be thinking about that, but if you walk away from this passage and you think, hey, it's about me being a good person, you missed it, right? One of the things that's really common today is you'll see the phrase, be a good human. Maybe you've seen it the other day. I was watching a sporting event, and one of the fans raises his arms like this, and tattooed right across his forearm is, be a good human. And you're like, okay, but what is it? You've probably heard the saying of like, hey, I just want to be a good human being, or they're such a great human being. And you say it, but it's an allusion to this term called humanism. The idea that humans are innately good, and our purpose is being good. But if you get on that, guess what? You walk away, maybe from that conversation I had with my neighbor, and what do you think about yourself? Pat yourself on the back, hey, I did pretty good, didn't I? But what just happened? Your focus shifted from the neighbor right back to who? You. It's right back on you. If it's all about being a good person, it's just about you. And you missed it. It's not about doing good works. It's about something so much bigger. And that's what I want to share with you. Let's keep going in 1 Peter 2, 21 through 24. It says, for God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his steps. He never sinned, nor ever deceived anyone. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threatened revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds, you are healed. What Peter is reflecting on is what we call the gospel. It's this good news that, hey, yes, we are called to good works, but it's not about the works. It's about who they reflect. Just as we enter into a marriage, it's about who it's reflecting. that being God, and mainly Jesus and what he's done for us. His overwhelming love that Jesus had this beautiful moment where he left the God of creation who could sit in the heavens protected. He would have no issues being fine. He had angels to attend to him. Nothing could harm him. And yet he left those comforts of heaven, came down, and he experienced what I'm calling his tough love. He experienced relationships where he healed, where he fed people, where he taught them. And yet, how did they treat him? Right? They insulted him. They beat him. They whipped him. And ultimately, they crucified him. He experienced tough love, yet he did it anyways. One of my favorite passages is the washing of feet. Not because it's so beautiful that Jesus got on his knees and washed his disciples' feet, but what's so beautiful to me is he's looking at his disciples and he knows, not long from now, you are about to all run away. You're about to all abandon me. I know how thin your love is for me, yet I'm doing this for you. It's absolutely beautiful. This is the gospel. Listen, if we get so caught up in the good works, it becomes the focus just on us. And by being just about us, at some point we're going to fail. At some point you're going to go, man, I don't have what it takes. I've been so beat up by this person. This other person is so focused on themselves. They never see me. They overlook me all the time. And I just don't have what it takes anymore to love them. I'm fed up. I'm done. I'm tired. The problem is if you're so focused on you, that's all you have. And when you fail and you feel like you don't have enough, that's it. And a terrible cycle begins. Right as we were about to leave the deployment, something happened where I was talking to people. They're ready to go home. They're excited to get home, but they're starting to experience tough relationships where people are getting a little picky. They're just ready to get out of here. And instead of reconciling these relationships, when people would jostle for position or whatever it was, they'd just be like, you know what, I'm done with this person. I'm never going to see him again after this deployment. They don't matter to me. Like, wow. Okay, I see how it is. Another is like, man, I can't wait till I get home because you know what? I have this beautiful work from home job. I only work like 20 hours. My employer doesn't even know it, but who cares? I get the work done in about 20 hours. The rest of the time I relax. I make well over 6 figures. I'm well taken care of, and I don't need Army anymore. I just want to get home. Hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, okay. I'm a pastor. I oftentimes will work 50 or 60 hours a week, and it's not about me. It's about the people. It's about Jesus' love for them. That's why I do what I do. But it was amazing because I could see what was happening. And it was that these people were slowly dehumanizing other people. Right? I can write you off. I'm never going to see you again. You don't matter. I think about why is it so easy to cut people off on the road? Well, because you're just another car on the road. There's a million of us here, right? And you will never see me again. I don't know you, and I'm tired of getting jostled around, so it's easier for me to cut you off. Now, if I was talking to you face to face, I would never do that. But what have I done? I've dehumanized you. I've devalued you. That's what I'm doing. It's a vicious cycle because you know why? What I tell myself about other people, hey, it's okay for me to cut this person off. It's okay for me to treat this person this way. I'll never see them again. They don't matter. You know what you're doing is you're saying the same thing about yourself. The minute that I look on that driver and I cut him off, I go, man, if I can cut you off because you don't matter, when I get cut off, what does it remind me of? That I don't matter. No one sees me here. I'm just one in a million of the cars on the road. No one cares about me. They'll take advantage of me. It's a vicious cycle. Here's what I love about tough love, and this is the concept that we're talking about today. Here's what I love about tough love. Tough love kicks off what I call the compounding love cycle. If you have a better term for it, let me know. I'm looking for a better term, but this is the best term I came up with, so here, let me describe it to you. The compounding love cycle is this. It starts with tough love, a relationship where it is tough. You're not getting anything out of it, right? It's not about you, it's about this person, and you might be mistreated. You might be getting the short end of the stick. But regardless, this relationship you're with, it's tough. That's where it starts. And what you do in this relationship is, regardless of what you're getting out of it, you still invest in this person. You still choose to love them. Why? Because you know Christ's love for them. And despite how hard it is, you still lean in, you still push forward, and you begin to shape the way that you see them, not as devaluing them, but valuing them the way that Jesus did. And slowly but surely, you begin to see them in a whole new light. You begin to see this love that Jesus has for them, that he would do anything for them to know that he loves them. And what's amazing is the harder the relationship is, the easier it is for you to write it off and say, it doesn't matter, I don't need it. The harder it is for you to press in and take one on the chin, the easier it is for you to see just how much God loves him. If I'm willing to do this for that person, just imagine what Jesus is willing to do for them. And what happens is, as you begin to value these people and love them the way that God loves them, you in turn, here's where the cycle turns, begin to remind yourself that that's how God loves you. In the same way that you would do anything to get through to them, Jesus would do anything to get through to you. What's amazing is it reminds us of the cross. It reminds us of the fact that, man, when Jesus came, I was the one that yelled those insults. I was the one holding the whip, striking his back. I was the one that took those nails, that nailed them through his hands. I'm the one that took that crown and pushed it on his head. And yet, what did he do for me? He looked up on that cross knowing he was going to die, and he said, I love you. He demonstrated tough love towards me. I don't deserve it. I can't earn it. I failed so many times. There's nothing I can give him. And yet he's chosen to love me. And the more I love people that way, the more I begin to see how much Jesus loves them, and the more I'm reminded of what Peter reminds us here, that he too loves me. It says, by his wounds you are healed. This is the compounding love. And so the question I'll ask you as you leave here is, who is that person right now that you need tough love towards? Who's that person that's really tough to love in your life right now? Maybe it's a doctor that's overlooked you. You've come in, you expressed your symptoms, and they just... Maybe it's kids who they still are in that mindset as you, the parent, serving them. And it's long due that they turn around and they serve you. Maybe it's that relationship where, hey, it's a friend group, and you've done nothing but ask them about their lives, and they still never seem to ask you about how you're doing. Maybe it's that pastor that never returned your phone call or your email. That list can go endless. But ask yourself, who do I get a chance to experience tough love with today? Because in doing so, you're going to experience Christ's love towards you. So thanks for letting me be here. It really is a privilege. Thanks, everybody.